Hey, baby. You feel a little better after your shower? Yeah. Good, I'm glad to hear it. And good timing, I just finished making the bed, so how about you come here and get cozy with me? There we go. Hi, darling. Mm. 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 You smell nice. What? You do? Come here. Is that the new lotion I bought for you? Yeah. You like it? Good, I'm glad. I thought this one seemed like the kind that you would pick out for yourself, so. Well, I'll have you know, I took it very serious trying to get the one that you would like. I mean, I must have smelled at least 30 different lotions to find this one, so I want you to remember that the next time that I'm being lazy. Oh, I missed you today. Yeah, you know I always miss you. I just wish we could spend more days in bed like this. We need a vacation. We deserve it. Oh, I don't know. Wherever. I mean, I would just love to go somewhere new with you. I think we should pick somewhere very relaxing, though. Like somewhere with a beach or a pretty garden or, I don't know, something like that. Somewhere where we could just spend a day doing nothing for a while. Oh, of course, we could still do our little book club. We could have a whole day just relaxing and then get tucked into our little hotel bed and I'll read to you just like usual. Sound good? Good. All right, it's getting late, so let's go ahead and get ready here. How about you turn off your light and I will grab our book. Okay, let's see. Here, why don't you scoot closer so you can see the book better? Yeah, here, let me get my arm around you. You can lay on my chest like usual. There we go. That's better. All right, what kind of story do you want tonight, darling? I know, there's a ton to choose from. The Snow Queen? Sure, yeah, we can read that one. I've never actually read that one before, so that'll be fun. And what do you want to listen to while we're reading? You want me to choose? All right. Let's see. I'm thinking maybe some music for tonight. Maybe something that sounds relaxing but a little bit fantastical. How about this one? Yeah, there we go. All right. You comfy? All right, sounds good. Good night, baby. The Snow Queen, a fairy tale in 7 stories. Story 1, The Shattered Mirror. A wicked imp made a mirror with the magic power to shrink anything good and beautiful and enlarge everything bad and ugly. Even the nicest people who looked into it became so nasty you wouldn't recognize them. All their nice parts shrank away, and their worst ones grew larger. The imp thought it was the best fun ever. The other imps joined in, holding the mirror up to people and cackling at what they saw. Then the imps thought they would fly up to heaven and make fun of the angels. But the higher they flew, the harder it was to keep hold of the mirror. Up and up they went, until all at once the mirror shot out of their hands and crashed to earth, shattering into billions of pieces. This caused even more mischief than before, because many of the pieces were smaller than a grain of sand, and they landed all around the world. Each tiny fragment had the same power as the whole mirror, so when one got into a person's eye, that person saw only what was bad. If anyone got a little bit in their heart, that was really awful. Their heart became like ice. The wicked imp laughed till his sides split. Story 2. Kay and Gerda. 2 children, a boy named Kay and a girl named Gerda, lived next door to each other and loved each other like brother and sister. They could step out of their bedroom windows onto a little roof garden between their houses. There they read together on summer days, smelling beautiful roses. In winter they played indoors. They would warm pennies by the stove, then press them on the frosted windows, making little peepholes to look out at the falling snow. One winter's evening, Kay melted a hole in the window frost and saw a large snowflake fall. The snowflake grew and grew until Kay saw it was a lady, dressed in fine gauze made from millions of starry flakes. She was tall and pretty, yet was made of glittering ice. Her eyes were bright like restless stars. She nodded to Kay, who was frightened and turned away. A few days later, Kay and Gerda were looking at a book on their roof garden when Kay said, "Ouch, something pricked me, and now I've got something in my eye." Gerda put an arm around him and looked closely while he blinked, but couldn't see anything. "I think it's gone," said Kay, but it hadn't. Tiny splinters of glass from the wicked imp's mirror were in poor Kay's eye and heart. "Why are you crying?" he asked Gerda impatiently. "It makes you look ugly. I'm fine now, there's nothing wrong." When Gerda turned back to their book, Kay said it was babyish. He had changed completely. The next day, Kay shouted to Gerda, "I'm off to sledge at the square with the older boys," and was gone. While the boys were sledging, a big white sleigh drove into the town square. Inside was a person wrapped in a white fur cloak and cap. The boys tied their sledges to the sleigh to be pulled along, and Kay joined in. Faster and faster they went, the driver turning round and giving Kay a nod as if they knew each other. Then the other boys tumbled away, and the sleigh sped out through the city gates. Kay tried to untie his sledge, but it was knotted tight and traveling like the wind. Snow fell so fast that he couldn't see. He shouted, but the sleigh went racing on. Then all at once the sleigh stopped, and the driver stepped out. It was a lady, tall, straight, and gleaming white, the snow queen he'd seen from the window. "Why, you're cold," she said. "Come wrap yourself in my bearskin cloak." She sat Kay beside her in the big white sleigh and put her cloak around him. It felt like sinking into a snowdrift. She kissed him on the forehead. Her kiss was colder than ice. He forgot Gerda and everyone at home. They flew over snowy woods and lakes, over cold seas and lands. Up above, the moon shone clear, and Kay watched it all the long winter's night. Story 3. The Old Magic Woman. Spring came at last. "Kay must be dead," said Gerda to the swallows. "We don't think so," they replied. Gerda put on her new red shoes and went down to the river. "Have you taken my playmate Kay?" she asked. "I'll give you my new shoes if you bring him back to me." She threw her shoes into the river, but they floated straight back. She thought perhaps she hadn't thrown them far enough, so she stepped into a boat to get further from the bank. The boat wasn't tied up and it floated off. Gerda was a little frightened, but thought, perhaps the river will take me to Kay. She came to an odd little house with 2 wooden soldiers outside. An old woman stepped out, leaning on a crooked stick. "You poor child drifting away," said the old woman. She hooked the boat with her stick and pulled it to the shore. Gerda told her story and asked the old woman whether she had seen Kay. The woman said no and gave her some cherries to cheer her up. She wasn't a wicked witch, but she had always longed for a little girl, and she wanted to keep Gerda with her. She combed Gerda's hair with a golden comb until the girl forgot all about Kay and about her home. The old woman had a lovely garden, with an especially beautiful rose bush. Gerda spent hours in the garden. One day, after she had lived in the odd house for a while, she was sitting by the rose bush smelling its scent, and she suddenly thought of the roses in the roof garden at home, and she remembered Kay. "Do you think he's dead?" she asked the roses. He isn't, they replied. Gerda ran out of the garden gate into the wide world. It's autumn already. I've lost so much time, she cried. I must find Kay. Story 4. The Princess and the Prince. Gerda traveled on, asking everyone she met about Kay. One day, a passing crow thought he might have seen Kay. He told her, "A clever princess lives in this kingdom." She wanted to get married and declared that any handsome young man was free to come and talk to her. The one who talked best would be her husband. Yesterday, a fellow arrived with shining eyes like yours, and he had lovely long hair but poor clothes. The princess thought he talked the best. Why, of course it was Kay, said Gerda, delighted. He's so clever. Oh, please, will you take me to the palace? My friend and I know a secret way in, said the crow. That night, Gerda and the two crows crept into the palace and found two beds shaped like lilies. In one lay the princess, in the other lay a young man. It looked like Kay. Gerda called his name and held up a lamp. He woke, turned, but it wasn't Kay. He only looked like Kay because he was also young and handsome. The princess woke too, in her lily bed. Gerda wept with disappointment and told the princess and the prince her story. You poor thing, they said. The prince gave her his bed to sleep in. The next day, they dressed her in silk and velvet, boots and a fur hand warmer. They put her in a coach of pure gold with a tray of sugar biscuits, fresh fruit, and ginger nuts. The princess and the prince wished her good luck, and the crows flapped their black wings. Goodbye, caw, caw. Story 5. The Robber Girl. The golden coach shone like fire as it drove through the dark forest. It caught the eyes of a band of robbers. The robbers rushed out of their hiding places, seized the horses, killed the coachman, and pulled Gerda out. But before they could kill her too, a wild, mischievous robber girl shouted, Stop! That girl will play with me. I want to go in the coach with her. And she got her own way, for she was so spoiled and willful. The robber girl had long dark hair, wore trousers, and carried a knife. As they drove in the coach, she asked Gerda, Are you a princess? Oh no, Gerda replied, and told her story. The robber girl put an arm around Gerda and said, I'll make sure they don't kill you. Well, if you must be killed, I'll do it myself. Then she took Gerda's hand warmer. At the robber's castle, the robber girl showed Gerda their bed. In the corner of a large stone hall, up above were hundreds of pigeons. They're all mine, said the robber girl, and this is my old deer. She ran a knife under the neck of the deer tied in the corner. Tickle, tickle, she said, and laughed as the poor creature backed away in fear. The robber girl asked Gerda to tell her again about Kay, and she fell fast asleep listening. But Gerda, not knowing whether she'd live or die, lay awake. In the quiet dark, the pigeons called down, Coo, coo, we've seen Kay. The Snow Queen took him beyond Lapland to where the ice never melts. Oh, how will I ever get that far north? Sighed Gerda. Then the reindeer said with sparkling eyes, I was born in Lapland. In the morning, Gerda told all this to the robber girl, who said to the deer, I love tickling you with my knife, but I'll let you go so you can take Gerda to Kay. The reindeer leapt for joy. The robber girl gave Gerda big woolen mittens to say goodbye. The reindeer sped through the forest all the way to Lapland. Story 6. The Woman of the North. Gerda and the reindeer traveled beyond Lapland into the freezing north. At last they came to a little house where an old woman was cooking fish in a pot. Gerda was too cold to tell her story, so the reindeer spoke for her. The old woman fed them and warmed them. Gerda took off her mittens and boots by the fire. Kay is indeed with the Snow Queen, said the woman. He is content, but that's because he's got a splinter of glass in his heart and another in his eye. They must come out, or the Snow Queen will keep him in her power. The reindeer asked, Can you give Gerda some kind of power too? The old woman smiled. I can't give her any greater power than she already has. Don't you see how well she has gotten this world in her bare feet? Her power is in her heart, because she is a sweet and innocent child. Gerda, you must go in by the berry bush in the Snow Queen's palace garden. As she said this, the old woman lifted the girl onto the reindeer, which ran off again as fast as it could. Oh, my boots, my mittens, cried Gerda, who had left them behind, but the reindeer hurried on. At the berry bush in the Snow Queen's garden, with tears rolling down its cheeks, the reindeer kissed Gerda, who stood in the snow in her bare feet. Gerda ran towards the palace, but met a regiment of snowflakes marching towards her, growing bigger as they came. They were the Snow Queen's guards. Gerda said her prayers, and her warm breath in the fierce cold became puffs of mist that turned into angels carrying swords and shields. The angels pushed back the snowflake guards, and Gerda walked through the palace, with the angels stroking her feet so she wouldn't feel cold. Story 7. The Snow Queen's Palace. The palace had over 100 great halls with walls of ice. A cutting wind blew through. The largest hall stretched for many miles. All of them were bare and were lit by the northern lights which danced in the sky. The Snow Queen had flown off to paint mountains with white, so Kay sat alone, stiff and silent in the emptiness. He was blue with cold, though he didn't feel it. He didn't feel anything. There, Gerda found him. She flung her arms around his neck, holding him tight and crying, "Kay, dear Kay." But he sat perfectly still and cold. Seeing this, Gerda wept hot tears. The tears fell on Kay and soaked through to his heart, where they melted the lump of ice and washed away the glass splinter. With that, Kay too burst into tears and wept till the bit of glass fell out of his eye. Then he saw Gerda and knew her and cried for joy. "Gerda, dear Gerda, where have you been all this time? And where have I been?" Looking round, he said, "How cold and bare it is." Gerda cried and laughed with happiness. She kissed his cheeks and they became rosy. She kissed his eyes and they shone like hers. She kissed his hands and feet and he was well and strong. Hand in hand, Kay and Gerda walked out of the palace talking of home, of their families, of the roses in the roof garden. Wherever they went, the winds dropped and the sun broke through the clouds. When they got to the berry bush, the reindeer was waiting to take them home to their own country. There, green things were growing and the birds were singing. A young girl wearing a red cap rode up on a splendid horse. It was the robber girl. She had left the band of robbers and was delighted to see Gerda. She promised to visit again before cantering off into the wide world. In Kay and Gerda's hometown, everything stood where it had stood before. But as they opened their front doors, they felt they had become grown-ups. In time, they forgot the Snow Queen's palace as though it had been a bad dream. The roses bloomed on their roof garden all the warm summers long. Good night, sweetheart. Get some rest.